Hi, everyone, and welcome to the sharing group, y'all. What am I about to say? I'm so excited. I'm so excited about our guest today. Today's lesson of A Course in Miracles is lesson 98, which states, I accept my part in God's plan for salvation. I accept my part in God's plan for salvation. And the word salvation is not the traditional sense of salvation, what we've known through religion, because according to the Course, there is no sin. And today's guest, y'all, Dr. Christine Dolahan, most certainly has a beautiful part in God's plan. We are all here in this ascension process, and she plays a huge part in that. Dr. Christine Dolahan holds a Ph.D. in Humanistic and Transpersonal Psychology. She is an energy psychology practitioner, certified life purpose coach, and intuitive consultant. Christine, welcome to the sharing group. We are so very happy to have you. I cannot wait to get into your experience.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so very excited too. I
Me
think
too. Like I'm girl,
great.
I'm
Yeah,
on the ninth adventure right now.
cool.
So yeah, start wherever you think is appropriate to start and talk about your pre-birth memories.
Yeah. Let's start with that. I came into this world with some pre-birth memories. Um, and really where to start there is the earliest memories I have is what must have been maybe like a few hours before I was born. I mean, that said, over on the other side, we are not living in a structured physical, dimension. It's time and space doesn't really exist. So I wouldn't really know exactly how much time it was right before my birth, right? But where
Mhm.
the memory really starts is with me being in this sort of both concrete but not concrete realm. So I had both colors swirl around me. It was almost like a more than 3D experience. I had colors swirl around me. It was just incredibly like warm and beautiful over there. There was some
Mhm.
kind of music playing, but then at the same time, I was downloaded with all these truths, and they were all ever loving, truths. Like there was nothing about this that was scary or, not loving or anything like that.
Mhm.
And I was walking, I was with somebody, I perceived someone, for lack of a better word, he wasn't human. He was also energy. So the way I perceived myself was as a ball of energy,
Mhm.
literally light. That's how I perceive myself. But at the same time, the cool part is that when we tap into love and our heart, that's exactly how, like, that's the consciousness. That's how I perceive myself. I was like, I always say I was my spiritual self. There
Wow.
was my human self, the ego self wasn't layered on top of me yet. It
Yeah,
was my spiritual self. And when I looked around me, I was just light. I was just light.
I love it.
And next to me was another spiritual being, and I knew that he was a little bit more advanced, although I want to be cautious about putting hierarchy on it in the way that we humans understand it. There wasn't like, oh, he's better than me or he's higher than me or whatever. And also the gender I put on it, I think because it was helpful for my soul,
Mhm.
not necessarily because the truth is that everybody over there is male and not female.
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
was just that my specific guide, you know, presented himself as male to me. And he was kind of tall and he was sort of wearing like purplish kind of robes. And he was incredibly loving and incredibly full of wisdom. And it was kind of clear to me that he had signed up, he had maybe gone through a couple of incarnations and had gotten to like a certain space where now he was mentoring other souls like myself to, in the earthly experience and evolving towards our common goal, which is merging back with, divine love, God, whatever
Mhm.
you want to call it. But really, the way I perceived it at that time was just love, because I was kind of part and parcel of it. That's what I was perceiving, but not enough yet to fully be able to merge back with love. Like I still had some things that I needed to work through. And I also knew very much that there was a sole purpose. There was a really big mission that they wanted me to do. And it was kind of like, you do this, you're really being a service to the grand divine plan. So we
Yeah.
were walking down this path, and I really didn't want to go because I knew what was happening. I knew where I was heading. I mean, it was really like, okay, here I go. I'm on this mission. This is my soul's purpose. This is good
Mhm.
for my evolution. But I really didn't want to leave this plane, this ever-loving plane. It was just so beautiful. I mean, more beautiful than anything. And I felt so connected. And so I was kind of resistant within it. And I'm like, I know I have to go, but do I really have to go? And so we had this telepathic conversation. And he was like, well, we talked about this, and, as a side note, to the left of me, I saw these buildings that were kind of planning or training buildings. I knew there were other souls in there with their soul groups, sort
Mm.
of creating their, working through their soul's purpose and working through their big lessons,
Mhm.
forgiveness, gratitude, love, compassion, all the good things that, help you reintegrate and understand who you truly are. And so I knew they were to the left, and I just come from them. So I debriefed. I knew my plan. I knew where I was going, and this was kind of like the way that I'm getting the image right now is like, Top Gun, when they like all take their, helmets and they're on the way to their planes and they're like, I'm on a mission. Like I
Yeah.
know this is my plan, but at the same time, I'm not so sure what I'm getting myself into. And so that's kind of what it was. And he was getting me, to my departure place. And so we were having this thing, and I'm like, I really don't want to go, it's so beautiful here. And he was like, well, you have to go,
Mhm.
this is good for you, right? I want to say here, because I gotten some feedback around that, which was like, great, this is punishment, or like, well, if it was so beautiful there, why didn't you stay?
Yeah.
Because I wasn't fully cleared yet. Like I still am,
Yeah.
a soul that needs to work on a couple of things before I'm
Mhm.
fully able to merge back into love, like most of us on planet Earth. So I just had a couple more things that I, needed to work through. And also, this mission was there that I really knew I needed to do. And so, he was like, well, we talked about this. You need to do this. And I was like, all right, I know. But I was like, well, if I need to do this, maybe at least I can kind of hang back and like, drag this out as much as I can. So I don't have to go back into this experience as, as quickly as I know I have to. But then,
Mhm.
at some point we arrived at this swirling vortex. And interestingly enough, behind me, this is a very good friend of mine who does intuitive artwork,
Wow.
channels these, and his name is Lee. Lee channels these. And if you're interested, I can, put a link there too. He does
Okay.
these
Yeah.
divine mandalas. He channels them, and he, the divine energy, and he channels concepts, but he also channels them for people. And this is a concept, and he sent this to me, and I was like, wow, this is precisely energetically in the
Wow.
universe, the place where I came from. So the hub I left in is this vortex swirl that you see there.
Mm-hmm.
That's precisely this funnel place. And that's where I was standing. We got there, and I was standing on one side, and there were several souls all around it with their mentors standing all around, also departing. I wasn't sure if they were departing to planet Earth or somewhere
Mm-hmm.
else. Although, now I get a sense that maybe that funnel was that specific funnel for planet Earth, and maybe the other funnels are for other realms. Who knows? But I was standing there, and I'm like, okay, so there's a couple of other souls, like jumping back into their life plan. And so I'm standing there, and I'm like, do I really have to go? And he was like, we really talked about this, but just know one thing. We're always there. You're not alone. We're always there. And the telepathic communication never stops. So telepathically, you can always talk with us. And if you feel alone, just start talking with us because we're here. And I think this is something that I had to remind myself very many times throughout my life when I would feel out of place and lonely and whatnot. I'd be like, man, he said he was always there. So maybe I just start talking with him. Maybe I just start talking with my divine team and God. And hey, lo and behold, things would start moving the moment that I would do that because
Wow.
they're here. We're here. We're supported. So in that moment, he was like, we're always here. We love you. And then he pushed me. So I fell down that funnel right there, and it was literally like you see that little swirl there. I don't know if you can see,
Mm-hmm.
like
Yes.
sucked into that, and then there was the switch point here. And what I recognize about this is that this is where I was sucked into my mom's womb. So the idea of the silver cord that a soul already has established with the body that's being built in the mother's womb, that's it. And so then that's when my soul and my body merged. And so I switched here, and that's when I felt the physical realm. That's when it started being bright, and I was bumped into my body. I was like, smack, boom. It was like a car crash. And I'm like, oh my God, here we go again. It was painful to breathe. I was constricting, all those things. And it was incredibly exhausting. I mean, there's a reason why babies sleep a lot, and moms sleep a lot after birth because it's an exhausting process to not just be birthed, but also birth, right? Both. I mean, we as women are so powerful. I'm just in awe. I mean, like literally, we're
Yes.
connected with the creator when we
Yes.
when we are pregnant and we're birthing.
Wow.
So that's kind of my experience. I had like several memories after as a child that would bubble up of
Mhm.
past lives and things I had chosen in my lifetime for specific reasons and things I came here for. But yeah, that's in a nutshell kind of my pre-birth experience. There's so much more to it. I could probably talk about it for 2 hours, but in a nutshell, that's kind of what that was like.
Oh, girl, Christine, the whole time you were talking, it's like my soul is like, yeah, I love this topic. I love this topic. I was just thinking about the many books I've read, and I cannot recall the authors, but Many Lives, Many Masters. Who was that? You remember? I don't know. It was a doctor who wrote that. Just many of the books that addresses life between lives. So thank you so much for sharing that. Yes, it's juicy. It's juicy. So I have so much of what you said. First of all, when you were talking about coming into your mother's womb, you got these lights. The room is cold. Everything is so, stark, right? It's just like such a stark contrast from the heaven that we come from. And I've often heard that birth is harder on the soul than death. And I wanted to highlight that because I know a lot of people are afraid of death, but I've heard people that death is like as simple as yawning. So thank you for that, for sharing that experience.
Of course.
One of the other things that I really wanted to highlight is when you said your guide said, we never are not in communication. You can communicate with us anytime you want, telepathically. So I wanted to highlight that. Like that is excellent. And you said you still do that. You reach out to your guide when
Oh,
you're
all the
having a
time.
hard time.
My practice in the morning really is, before I get up, I meditate, and then I go into prayer. And my prayer is really connecting with God, connecting with my guides, asking for support throughout the day, whatever the day may hold. I place, angels, millions of angels all around all of my family members so that when they go out, they are protected because I know that we have this whole big team of people. And listen, I forget sometimes too, but then when I remember that that's, I
Mm-hmm.
need to do, my days usually go easier, and I've had angry conversations with God too, where I'm like, God, you really got to help me here, and my higher power, I call my higher power God, but
Yeah.
it really is just a name, right? And just a
Yeah.
feeling. Sometimes I
Yeah.
say higher love because I perceive God as love, as just unconditional ultimate love. That's my truth of it. But sometimes I'm like, man, you really got to help me here. But
Yeah.
it's interesting that every time I say that, when I have a really bad day, I feel really angry or whatever else, no kidding, things will turn around within 5 minutes or so. I will have a friend text me and be like, hey, I'm just driving by your house and I had a feeling I wanted to reach out to you. Do you want to go for coffee? Or, whatever else it is. And suddenly my day gets better. And it's because I'm asking for help,
Yeah.
right? We have free will. So they won't breach our free will, right? And unless we give permission to talk with our higher guidance, um, you know, they won't come in and help, right? We need to give permission, but it's good to know that we do have that help available to us. I also want to say a little bit of like a cautionous thing. When we ask for help, we always want to say of the most radiant and highest love, because there's so many energies that might be tricksters that might want to come into our energy and like they're not really of the highest love. So we always want to make sure and protect our boundaries by saying, I only want to be in communication with those that are of the highest, most radiant, loving consciousness. Nobody else is allowed in my space other than that. So I thought that was a really important point.
I love that. And I say that too, Christine. I'm always like I invite the highest vibrations of
Mhm.
energies that know me and associated with me. I only invite those because you're right. And I'm realizing that and recognizing that I really would we got to return. We're going to return to that topic.
Oh yeah.
We're going to return to that topic because we're ascending collectively and we're getting to a point where people are hearing, voices and they say, these are my guides. But I found a few times that those people are not the most loving people. And so I'm like, if it's their guides, are these high vibrate, that I started to make me realize just because they're calling them guides doesn't mean that they're high vibrational energies. And
Yes.
so I love that you talked about that when we talk to our guides, that we specify the highest vibrational energies around us, not just anybody, because just like we're all, we have many different vibrations, so does non-physical beings.
Right. Because there's really no, thank you for saying that. There's really no
Yeah.
difference between being inside of a body or outside of a body. Like I was sharing earlier,
Yes.
the light I perceived as myself was, and the voice that was, that was speaking to myself is the voice that's speaking with you. That's my soul,
As
right?
you, oh,
And
I
and
love it.
it's just I'm a soul incarnated, right? But there's so many different beings out there that are
Yeah.
in different dimensions and vibrations, and just because we hear someone speak with us, doesn't necessarily mean that they're of the highest, most radiant love. And there's many, signs and signals that we can, if language, designation and all of that, where we can be like,
Mm.
wait a minute, are you really of that? Like, are you one of those tricksters that's just
Mm.
trying to get me down a different path? And I don't
Mm.
want to scare people here,
Yeah.
but we just want to make sure it really feels ever loving and there's never like you must do this or whatever, any kind of like instructions of that, but it's really like, and so the best thing I think is just the intention of connecting with divine love, like the Course in Miracle teaches,
Yeah.
God, divine love. If you have that intention, you're golden. I
Yeah.
think.
This is so, I love this. I love this. You're so deep, Christine. I love it. I love it. I love it. No, I feel like we all need to hear this because this is new for this particular timeline on this planet. We're embarking on new territory. So it's time to have these conversations and discussions about where people start to open up, their psychic abilities and that kind of things. And you hear that a lot where it's like my guides, but it's like, okay, making sure that these energies are loving, making sure they're loving. So I love that. Do you remember, Christine, choosing your body or your parents? Do you remember any of that, or was just really your time with the guide before you were going plunging down the realm to come here on the planet Earth?
So I think I mentioned that when I was a baby still. So I would say that was like maybe my first year. I had moments where I connected with past life memories, where I, had different past life memories and different times where I remembered how I died. And that is just a return to what you were saying. This is, based on these memories and an intuitive knowing that, yes, I want to say that cautiously because I think death can be really hard for people as well, especially when there's a lot of fear and,
Mm-hmm.
and we want to hold on to this physical, reality because we think
Yeah,
this is all there is.
yeah,
That death can be very hard. And
yeah.
I've seen it in my own father who passed away almost a year ago on October 5th. It'll be his 1 year death anniversary. And he was very afraid and death was very hard for him. So, not to diminish that, but I do agree with what you were saying. Birth is far more hard because it takes such a long time. It's so hard for a soul to fully integrate with the body. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not just like, boom, here I am slammed into this body. Now it's all cold and like I have to breathe and all these things. It goes up to like 2, 3, 4 years, where suddenly now we have to learn all these things. Now we have parents, and they're not always unconditionally loving, like we know from the other realm. So now we cry. Why isn't mommy holding me right now? And then as a society, we have all these ideas of like, well, they're just trying to manipulate you, blah, 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 which is a totally different topic, but it's also a topic that needs to be talked about in terms of how are we creating an ever unconditionally loving society,
Mm-hmm.
right? Moms and as people, as caregivers, we have such a big responsibility there, and not to put more pressure on moms because they already have enough, but to just see what a huge soul purpose it is to choose to become a mother.
Yes.
Because we are literally
Yes.
showing, and helping these souls like integrate with their bodies and understanding, okay, it's maybe not as unconditionally loving as I remember it from over there, but hey, this mommy's doing a pretty good job. And then
Yeah.
when children are raised in that way, then they'll raise the next generation in that way. And that's how we create heaven on earth. That's how we create this ever-loving society that we're building right now.
Yeah.
But in terms of what your question was, so as I was a baby, I got these downloads of like being afraid of dying and then being like, oh, this is actually pretty nice, and like floating out of my body and
Mhm.
seeing everybody mourn and and in that moment also knowing, okay, this life experience, was okay. And I understand why I had this. Like I had one where, I was very sick, a very sick child. I had another one, most recent one before this one, I believe, where I was with very, very loving parents, but they were very poor and they couldn't really provide for me in that way. And I died as a younger child. My mother grieved a lot about me. I remembered all those things. Um, and so based on that, I got kind of downloads of why I chose certain things in this lifetime. And my parents specifically, I was very blessed to have grown up in a more prosperous household. And I
Mhm.
was very blessed. I was born in Switzerland. I grew up in Germany for 12 years of my life. And then my father, who was a CPA, was promoted to a high power position in New York, being, a very high executive in a CPA company in New York. And that got me to the United States.
Mhm.
But all of that, as I'm realizing now, set me up for my soul's purpose. And I knew that ahead of time because without having been able to grow up in a more prosperous family and having had the opportunities that I got through my family, um, I wouldn't have been able to be here, right? So I did choose privilege in a way, but for my soul's mission. And that said, I also chose parents that were very authoritarian. And as a soul remembering this beauty over on the side, it was very hard for me at times. It was very hard not to, be held and, the way that I wanted to and be misunderstood at times, where my mom just thought she was doing the best by, telling me, oh, she's just manipulating or whatever. I still come from the era where I was, spanked sometimes. And that was not good for me. That was that
Yeah.
that really traumatized me as a
Yeah.
soul. And I'm like, holy shit,
Wow.
all I want is love. Now I'm being spanked. What's going on? And so yes, I had parents before that were so very loving, right? And
Mhm.
I felt so loved with them, but they couldn't provide the financials for me. And as a soul, I understood we're in a physical world. Money makes the world go round, not in a bad way, but we need that in order to get to a space where you are heard and you can then live your soul's purpose. So that's, for instance, one thing that I remember very consciously choosing. And I'm sure there's a million others, but just to answer the question in that way.
Talk about your there's many questions I have for you, Christine. You touch on you have had such a rich experience. But since you've talked about the soul's purpose, have you been able to discover your purpose of being here?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. I have, and talking about the shift in consciousness that we're going through right now, which is
Mhm.
really, we're saying we're ascending, but it's kind of like we're kind of already there in some ways because
Okay.
it's an internal shift, right? It's not so much
Yes.
outward. I've
Yes.
had people come to me and be like, oh, is this gonna like, is our world fundamentally going to change? Is this the end of the world as we know? Is it gonna go down and explode? And I'm like, no, it's not
Right.
gonna explode. I mean, it is a little bit, but more in the sense of the fear-based thinking isn't working anymore for us. So
Yes.
I would always say the Course in Miracles is actually the Bible for the new consciousness because what they're saying in there is really exactly what we're going through. It's a shift towards love. It's a shift away
Yes.
from ego and the physicality of things. But it's all happening within us. It's already happening within us. And
Yes. Yes.
but uh now I lost train of thought. What was the
Yeah.
question?
So you were talking about your purpose, like your part in that.
Right. Oh yeah, yeah, that's where we were. Sorry.
Mhm.
There's so much stuff coming,
Wow.
coming in to talk about. But yeah, so my soul's purpose is really kind of there. Um I see myself as like a teacher for higher consciousness. That's really what they've talked to me about. They're like, you're here to teach about love. What's also interesting is I never liked my name, but Christine means, the this what not the salvation, but like along those lines, the one that
Wow.
is saved, or the one that is teaching the word of the saving, right? And
Um,
as you were saying, it's not along the lines of sin, but it's really along the lines of teaching love, right? Teaching
yes.
that higher
Mhm.
consciousness. And
Yes.
that's really where spirit is pushing me now towards. They're like, you're here to educate people because as you said, with this new paradigm comes so much of uncharted territory in the realms of transpersonal psychology, psychospiritual, all of that, things that we haven't really, we haven't been there, and people are like excitedly running into their spiritual journey, but then before you know it, they bump into, like the roadblocks, like
Yes.
negative energies or whatever else, disempowerment. Like this is an
Yes.
age of empowerment. And what I mean by that is that like religion and cults and that kind of thing, the structured way of how we, like perceive the world is falling away a little bit. And by that, I'm saying more and more people are like, I don't want to be in the structured thing, And I always say, just because you're religious doesn't mean you're spiritual. There's this chart, where they say you can be a little bit spiritual and a lot of religious. You can
Mhm.
be only religious and not spiritual. And by what that means is religious is mostly based around tools and community. But just because you have the tools and just because you have the community doesn't mean you're connected on a spiritual
Yes.
level, right? And
Yes.
so religion for more and more people is falling away because they're not finding that access point through a specific religion because a lot of religions teach separation and fear and not the union, the oneness, the unconditional love. So more and more people are going more on the metaphysical route to God, which is just like, I'm my own temple or church. And I don't need anybody else to communicate with God for me, right? I can communicate with God. Like what I was saying, the first thing I do when I wake up is like, God, help me, Like I have my specific guides. I know they're ever loving. Please come in and help me today because I know I have that power, right? I have my church within me.
Yes.
And and that's really where my soul's purpose comes in is to help people and to teach them through my own walk, not as a way of like, oh, listen to me now. I'm the great, I'm going to save you. No, it's more
Right.
about what I do in my practice too is really I tell people this is, empowerment. I'm empowering you. I'm helping you connect with your own higher purpose
Yeah.
and your mission. And then you're on your own because you don't need me anymore. All you need is God,
Mm.
right? But we have to learn, we have to teach, like we have to learn this, right? This is an education. So I'm like a higher consciousness educator, for lack of a better
I
word.
love it. Define transpersonal psychology.
So I think we have to backtrack a little bit to make people
Mhm.
understand,
Mhm.
sort of how psychology worked through, the different ones. So, initially there's the physical way of thinking about psychology. It's more the
Mhm.
behavioral way of like, I give a dog a treat, he starts salivating, and then that way I can manipulate him into certain behaviors. It's very like biologically based, right? We moved on from that, towards like the mid 19th century, towards more of like the cognitive, like, oh yeah, yeah, we do have feelings, we do have,
Yeah.
thoughts that motivate our behaviors. A lot of what psychology is today is still based in that. So if I say I'm going to a traditional therapist,
Mhm.
they most likely are trained in that way. So they look at you and they say, okay, well, where did you grow up? Right? They assume that you've been a clean slate. You came in as a baby. Where did you grow up? Oh, you grew up in an abusive household. Oh, you were poor. Like they'll consider all these like surrounding forces. And then based on that, they will let you talk it out. Maybe they'll have a tip or two. But, that's kind of like the traditional way of how we think about it. They usually stay away from anything that's outside of the idea that we're a body and maybe some emotions, right?
Mhm.
But transpersonal psychology and integrative psychology is coming in now, and it's aligned with consciousness, the idea of we're evolving in consciousness, and they're coming in and they're saying, yes, we're a body. And yes, we have emotions and we have thoughts. And yes, we are also a spiritual being in a physical body having, a physical experience.
Mhm.
Like what I was saying, I mean, I remember being a soul bumping into my body, right? So
Mhm.
we're all of these things. And
Yeah.
so it's a holistic way of looking at it. And it's kind of like, well, it really goes into a lot of what it goes into is a soul mission and the idea that Viktor Frankl talked about it in Man's Life for Meaning and other, works of his. And he's one of my biggest mentors in spirit. I love him. And he talks about that once people find their soul's mission and their soul's purpose, all depression clears up, all anxiety clears up, and they're filled with a joy and a drive that they haven't had before. And
Mhm.
that's kind of what transpersonal psychology is based on. It's the idea that yes, we do have a soul's plan. Yes, we do come in here for a specific purpose, small and big purposes. We
Mhm.
have different purposes, not just one. We might have a purpose of being a mother. We might have a purpose of working out different relationships, most definitely. We might have a really big purpose of maybe creating great artwork for people or coaching people or, doing podcasts and bringing the
Mhm.
good word out or whatever it
Mhm.
is, right? We have all of these. And once we connect with that, and we connect with the idea that we're also spirit, then we really like heal in a more holistic way. And
Mhm.
that's what transpersonal psychology and psychotherapy is really based on now. It's not licensable yet. There's not many practitioners out there because, all kinds of regulating authorities will come after you. But it is something that, I'm calling for now. We need to start exploring as a humanity because traditional therapy. I mean, I have so many clients that come to me and say, hey, traditional therapy is just not working for me anymore. I spent 3, 4 years talking to somebody, venting it out, and I'm still at square one. And then
Mm.
I go to an energy healer, or I go to somebody who works more holistically, right? And I start discovering my soul's purpose, and I start, and suddenly things are starting to move for me. It's because we're in that age, and that's where we're moving. It's, evolving like anything else. So, did that answer the question?
Absolutely. It's you know what? It's consistent, Christine, with everything else in terms of our inward evolution, right? Like you said, it's happening within us. And I think that's then flowing into all the other areas that we never questioned why we did it a certain way. And it's like, yeah, well, this because usually in a medical field, I'll talk about the medical field where if your leg is hurting or your knee is hurting, we give you a pill, right? And you treat the symptom. But now we are evolving to a point where it's like, what is your knee telling you? Like, why is your knee experiencing discomfort, where we realize and recognize that we are carrying these bodies, but we are not only these bodies, right? Just mind, body, and spirit, just as holistic individuals. So, fabulous work. Thank you for your contribution
Yeah.
in
Thank
that way. Um, I wanted to talk about, so first of all, I wanted to go back to the point when you were about to dive into the mother's womb to be born. I just wanted to camp out just a little bit on the little bit of the apprehension you have. And I wanted, and this is something that I talk about a lot, Christine, on this platform, is that Earth is a schoolhouse, that only the greats come to this planet. We know it's not easy being here. And as souls, we're not, like you said, we're not forced to come, but we understand what we've signed on to, and we understand that it's not gonna be cookies and cream. Now, I do believe we're in the process of creating that here, right? Creating heaven on earth. But just to let everybody know that if you're here, uh, then you're one of the greats, right? You are a soul that is evolving to even journey this particular experience.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah,
Talking about it, I got like Top Gun back in my head, and I'm like, yeah, we're all little heroes, honestly. I think what we need to validate is that coming here takes a lot of courage. It does. And
yeah,
I also want to say, I've had some people ask me and be like, well, why is it that, like, I've heard some people say there's souls lined up, they just want to jump into this physical experience, but then there's also other souls who are kind of like, I don't know about it. And the way that I perceive it is that they're basically just on different ends of the journey, right? And if you're like, I don't know about it, you probably went through the mill a couple of more times
yeah,
and you remember how hard it is down there.
yeah,
Whereas the ones that are wanting to just jump in, they're maybe, like a little bit further behind in their evolutionary process in the sense of like, and again, there's no hierarchical, like they're better than or whatever. That doesn't exist there, but it's just like, okay, well, they maybe not have had that many of an ex like, that many experiences.
right.
But they're equally excited because they know that once they come here, they get a chance of being in relationships, learning the emotions, and through emotions is how we evolve and learn more about love, right?
Yeah,
Like that's the whole sense, the point and purpose of why we're here is
yeah,
so we can experience how to forgive or what kindness and compassion means or these different aspects of
yeah,
love, right? Gratitude or whatever. We can't experience that on the other side, and that's why I said, I would love to stay over there, but I just wasn't ready yet. My soul wasn't polished enough yet
yeah,
to be fully merging with that loving power, which is also why I told my guide, and I'm like, wow, can this at least be the last time? And he's like, well, if you do a good job and you learn all the lessons and you really study, you really throw yourself into it, then absolutely this could be, maybe not your last one, but one of the last ones, and so that's why some people are like, wow, I'm 37. And they're like, you did more than most people do in a full lifetime. And I'm like, well, because I'm here to get shit done. And like, I'm wanting to like merge back with that, but yes, it is hard here. And I do believe that we are still in a school environment, but I do believe
Mm-hmm.
moving out of that 3D school environment. And
Mm-hmm.
at some point, this won't be the harsh environment
Oh,
anymore.
good.
It will move into more of a heaven on earth kind of realm. But for now, we're still there, and we're still getting, we're still having those lessons, right? And then when it gets really hard, which it does for everybody, no matter how enlightened you believe you are, right? Talk
Yeah.
about spiritual narcissism and spiritual bypassing. Just because you're on a spiritual path, it's still hard. And sometimes it gets even harder. So I've discovered that a lot of people have really hard lives are actually ready for it. You will not get what you're not ready to digest and chew, and when it gets really hard, calling on that divine team, knowing how to call on them and really call in the love, because then it gets easier, right? There's no need to, pedal up the hill you can get a little motor to push you up the hill, right? So.
Yes. Yeah. I love everything you said. I love everything you said. You mentioned spiritual narcissism and spiritual bypassing. That's something I've recently experienced. Now, I did not know what spiritual bypassing was. I just knew that I was experiencing someone who was not nice. And I just had this mental block, cognitive dissonance, where it's like I'm not believing what is what I'm experiencing in my mind. I'm like, no, no, they're not there. It's not that. It's not that. And I did so much of that that I finally had to come to a point and I'm like, Loretta, how do you feel? You can try to analyze this till the birds come home, but how do you feel when you experience this person? And I had to finally validate my feelings, even as other people were telling me, well, no, there's something wrong. There's something you need to unpack. And that's all good. Maybe it is. But you know what? At the end of the day, I don't feel good when I interact with this person. So I feel like of all just like everything else you talked about, Christine, this is something that we need to talk about as a collective, uh, the spiritual bypassing. And it's so funny because I'm a part of Tina Spalding's group. She channels Jesus with A Course in Miracles, and someone in her group asked Jesus about spiritual bypassing, and he validated that it's not one of those new terms that doesn't really exist. So, did you want to add anything about spiritual bypassing?
Yeah, I think it's a really important topic to talk about and to also make aware, because I think like with anything, spirituality can be sort of worked with in a way that can be problematic. I've had and it's sort of like along the lines of like this is the magical, be all cure all. It's often I'm seeing people kind of give their power away to other people,
Yes.
and that's often when, we then run into spiritual narcissism because other people say, "Oh, I'm the holy savior, and and I'll I'll
Yeah.
I'll I'll fix you." Oh my God, red flag, stay away from these people. If they claim they can fix you, nobody can fix you but you yourself. You
Yeah.
are your own healer. You can
Yeah.
have guides that can, in the physical as well as in the non-physical, that can guide you in a specific way, but most likely you will have different guides based on your consciousness, right? And somebody will walk with you on your hand for a while and then they'll switch and then somebody else comes in. Um, but coming back to the spiritual bypassing, it's kind of like, when we go through dark times and dark emotions, like um that many people do, and this is part of the evolutionary process. Without the dark emotions, we wouldn't be evolving. The lotus grows
Mm-hmm.
from mud.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the lotus grows from. But then it becomes this beautiful flower, right? And so we won't blossom into beautiful flowers if we don't engage with the mud. But it's not pleasant, right? That's why this is
Right.
such a courageous planet. It's not pleasant to have to contend with fear, with, pain, with heartbreak, with grief, with all of it. It's not pleasant. We don't want to actually feel it, most of us. And
Yeah.
so in the negative, right, we go into addictive behaviors, whatever that may be, drugs, alcohol, sex, most common, but you know, shopping or whatever else, anything that will like gratify you in an instant, those are the lower hanging fruits, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Grab them, they make us feel a little bit better for a moment, but then they'll crash us into either a hangover or
Mm-hmm.
heartbreak or whatever else, right? And then some of us realize, oh, well, maybe there's another way. And then we go to spirituality. But when we go to spirituality thinking, wow, that this is it now, right? I'm just going to go to my healer and he's going to make it go away. I had a friend of mine who was like, "Oh, I have this healer," and every time there was a breakup with a boyfriend, she'd go to this healer and be like, "Oh, he's gonna take it away," and I'm like, "But hold on, are you actually learning from the feelings?
Right.
Are you actually sitting with this? I mean, it's fine if you
Right.
get somebody to help guide you through this, right? But to just take it away, and I have a
Yeah.
process where when I see people come to me for that process and they're just take it away, I'm like, okay, hold on, let's have a coaching session first. Let's sit with this. Let's see what the lessons in this is. And then when we feel and spirit guides us that we have learned enough about this, and what are we learning? How are we being love in this, right? Like what's
Mhm.
love, what's fear in this lesson? And once that lesson is learned and we've really felt the feelings, then we
Mhm.
can energetically remove it. But if we just start removing it and not actually wanting to deal with the
Yeah.
feeling, the
Yeah.
hardness of it, that's when we're spiritually bypassing. And that's when
Mhm.
we're using spirituality in a very concerning way to me, right?
Mhm.
And I often will have conversations with clients of mine who do this, and I will say, you're welcome to go somewhere else, but I can't do that. Ethically, I can't do it. I
Yeah.
want you to, like we can't just take it away. It's not going to get better. I can't just
Right.
magically fix you, right?
Yeah.
If that was the case, that everybody would do this, right? But this is not
Mm-hmm.
how the universe works. We still need to feel the feelings and work through it and have the experience to fully learn from it.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important work. I think there's something to be said about shadow work, what you're saying too. The person saying, like, well, maybe there's something to unravel within me.
Mm-hmm.
And, they say shadow work is the biggest, catalyst for consciousness change if you're up for it. But it's also one of the most painful and hardest because it's mirror, right? It's literally
Yeah.
like what in them is triggering me so much that is actually within me.
Yes.
That's painful. That's painful because it means, well, am I not enough? Am I broken? No, you're not, right? That's ego talking. That's fear
Yeah.
talking.
Yeah.
But understanding that and unraveling that then becomes like, oh, wow, well, if that is totally not true, then what am I? Well, unconditional love, of course,
Yeah.
right? And that
Yeah.
can fall away. So I
Yeah.
think this is really important. And because it's something that's so it's starting to be prolific in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And then unfortunately, there's also people there talking about spiritual narcissism that make people believe that they have the end all be all solution. And then this gets dragged through the mud where then people come in and be like, see, I told you, they're all charlatans. They don't do any, and it's sad because this path really works. It's just
Mm-hmm.
a matter of discerning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Discernment is a really big important word here.
Yeah, that I think it's I the word came to me balance, right? If somebody's doing something or saying something that is, of course, triggering you, and this is the course principles we're talking about, where you unpack that and fit like, why am I triggered? Do I really believe what they say? But then also acknowledging this person may not be for you. Like this person may not be a vibrational match for you, and you don't have to stay stuck in a friendship or a relationship that is not mutually beneficial for both parties, all behind the thought that we're in a spiritual space. um so I love everything you said.
And
Can you?
I love that too. I just want to highlight that. It's
Okay.
okay when we realize that people are not a vibrational match, right? And when they're toxic to us and they specifically when they start draining us so much that they start affecting our health, it's okay
Yeah.
to say there's nothing bad about that. To say, hey, listen, I love you. I wish you well in your life's experience, and I'm out of here. So I think
Yes.
it's such an important point. Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for that. I feel like this, it just needs to be said. We're all so nice and polite, right? Polite. We want to just, we have to be authentic and I go back to like you talked about the emotions,
Mm,
honoring our feelings. Uh, I just think because it is a form of self-love, right? So, something you said in another interview that I loved that you said when you were a baby, you remember, first of all, you weren't crazy about your name, right? Because you remembered you had another name in another lifetime. And you said that the parents would be like, oochie coochie coo, like putting stuff in your face, and you'd be like, I get it. Okay, I see the toy. I was cracking up. I loved it. Can you talk about that? Just because I think it's so important for us. You talked about so much. Talked about unconditional love and then corporal punishment. We really I love this generation. I love our generation of parenting because a lot of us are waking up, right? And so when you are a parent and you are woke, it wakes you up to every aspect of life and you see a baby, you see your child differently. You see them as souls that have chosen you and your partner as parents, a lot of times very evolved beings, right? You see God in them, and the way that we were parented, we realize that's not accurate. These are their souls in these little bitty bodies, and they have had previous lives, they have purposes, and I love when you talked about that because I think about babies. When you look in their little eyes, it's like, this is a powerful being, and letting me engage with them in the highest way possible, you
mm,
know?
yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And I think what I'd like to add to it is um I think when I was mentioning authoritarian parenting, right? And the way
Mhm.
that I was parented, my parenting experience, my parents did the best they could. And
Yes.
they love me very much, I know that. And they parented me in a way that, they thought was best for me, right?
Right.
And that wasn't always true because from their mindset, it really was, I'm the parent, I know best. You're a little baby, there's nothing before this, right?
Right. Right.
The concept of, well, maybe this is a more evolved soul, right? Didn't exist. The concept of, well, maybe this is my teacher. Maybe this little baby right in
Yes.
front of me here
Yes.
is my teacher. And I always tell people, when I became a mom almost 4 years ago, I was already on the spiritual path. I've been on the spiritual path really honestly since I've been born, more or less, right?
Mhm.
But I was already on the spiritual path, and in my 20s, I would look for, well, who's my guru? What's my, where's my teacher? Where's my spiritual teacher? And
Mhm.
nothing would ever really feel aligned, right?
Yeah.
And in the last 4 years, I realized, wow, my spiritual teacher came in the form, and really teachers, because I had two children now, but they came in the form of little blonde babies, with blue eyes, really teaching me something.
Yes.
I would say, I always say to my daughter too, I say, I teach you something about how to use this human body and how to function in society, right? In the
Hmm.
most loving way. But you teach me so much more about myself because
Yes.
kids can push your triggers and
Yes.
you think you're so enlightened. Well, you aren't, try to like, be a caretaker
Yeah.
24/7.
Yeah.
Consult, like help them through a meltdown when you've worked and you've done, housework, and you've worked your ass off all day, and you're tired yourself, but now here they need you more than, you need yourself, but you're so tired you just want to lie down. Like, that's really courageous work. And I had a professor in my program when I was still studying once tell me, and they were like, it's easy to be enlightened when you're, a monk in a monastery, just sitting there,
Yes.
you have the conditions and everything. It's
Yes.
easy, very easy,
Yeah.
right? It becomes harder when you're a householder.
Yeah.
Like, it's the Dalai Lama at 5 kids screaming at him all day long. Do you think he would be smiling and, maybe he would be. I don't, oh my gosh, I'm like, but it's hard. It's hard
Yeah.
to walk the spiritual path because kids trigger you in such a way, right? And they really are our teachers.
They are.
And, you said something else about my experience has been that the children will always be a little bit more consciously evolved, or, a little bit higher consciousness
Mm-hmm.
than the parents. So, and that's kind of going with, we teach our parents more than, they teach us.
Yeah. So, Christine, I wanted to hone in on the importance of validating our kids when they have spiritual experiences, or like in your case, you had pre-birth memories, you had memories of other lifetimes, and they were consistently invalidated because, of course, your parents did not understand. Can you talk about how that impacted you, and how, and just the importance of validating our kids?
Sure, yeah. Well, first off, let me say that it was very hard for me as a child when primarily my mother, because she was mostly around, but when my parents didn't validate that, and, not just invalidated it, but were kind of like, oh no, this was probably just a dream, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
As, as children, and I can only speak from my own experience, but
Yeah.
I perceived my parents as gods, like they were on the same level as God, right?
Yeah.
They know everything. I ask them everything. They take care of everything. Really, literally, we project that on our parents. I projected that
Yes.
on my
Yes.
parents. And so if they're all knowing, right, and they tell me this was not an experience, then of course as a child that's very confusing, because
Mm-hmm.
you had this experience, you're not lying about this is all about reality. You tell this to somebody you love so dearly and think they know everything, and then they invalidate it. So that plunged me into really like a little bit of a meaning crisis, because I was like, well, what if this isn't real? Then maybe I did just dream about it, maybe. And then very careful about who I would share this with.
Mm-hmm.
I started becoming afraid and fearful, because I was like, well, people are going to think I'm crazy. People think I made this up. People are going to ridicule this.
Mm-hmm.
And it really, as I was moving into teenagehood, I became, because I also was not raised in a religious household per se, which was good in a way because there was no dogma that was placed on me. But I, arguably had the dogma of science. I had the dogma of, if you can't measure it, then it's not real, right?
Yeah.
And I think we're moving out of that paradigm a little bit and understanding, that there's so much more. And speaking about quantum physics, everything we spoke about before, this is discovered in quantum physics. We're marrying spirituality and religion with science, because we're going to be able to put equations and math on it, because we're starting to realize it's all the same, right? But I grew up in the household where it was like, well, if you can't measure it, it's not real, and God doesn't exist. He's just a made up man.
Yeah.
Purposes of fearing people into something, right? That was kind of like that. And so I kind of started not having any sort of safety ground or place where I could come back to, right? And so I became a very sort of isolated and sad teenager, also for other reasons. But I was very isolated, very sad. depressed to a certain point. That was also invalidated. And then I found myself in my early 20s, really like what I was saying earlier, I went and bypassed with, in a negative way, with, really partying and a lot of alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
Not, alcoholic in the greatest sense of the word, but in some ways I needed alcohol and I needed parties. That was my sense of fun, to somehow be able to deal with the harshness and the hardness of what I was experiencing. Meanwhile, always kind of going back in between, I would have these roller coaster ride where I would have like brief moments where I'd peruse, the bookshelves of a library or of a bookstore for spiritual, books, to figure out, was this real or was this not? Mm-hmm. And it was really when my good, childhood friend passed away. He was 3 years younger, so I had known him when he was in the womb. And I always had this feeling, even as a child, that he wouldn't be very old. And I never could place it until he came down, with cancer, and, in his late teens, early 20s. And it was very aggressive because he was so young and his cells were reproducing so quickly, very aggressive. And it was a shock to all of us, my parents being best friends with them, when he passed away. And that really tumbled me into another one of those meaning crises, where I was somebody who was very afraid of death, because based on my parents' paradigm, there was nothing there. We were just
right.
That, and I'm like, that can't be. And then I have these memories, and I know they're memories. I know they weren't dreams. And why do I know that? Because they're more real than a dream. A dream is hazy and like you kind of can't remember it. And, this is an experience that I completely remember, like it just happened 5 minutes ago. Mm-hmm. So long story short, I was really depressed in my early 20s, but also speaking about the heart feelings were really what propelled me. They were a catalyst for my own awakening.
Yes.
At some point, I really started, I had one breaking point. I remember it very well. I was actually studying back in Germany. After about 10 years of living here in the United States as a teenager, kind of transplanted here more or less by my parents, I decided I want to go back to Germany because my childhood was beautiful there. And I was trying to find some sense of peace and happiness there that I had as a child, and didn't find it there at all. And at one point I found myself, after I was in a horrible relationship at the time with a person that was very broken himself. And and he had this pattern of sort of going out with me and then flirting with other women, and not just flirting with them, but like, full on dancing with them in a very, physical way, and me getting incredibly, jealous. And all my friends were like, what are you doing with him? And so most of our evenings going out ended up with me crying somewhere in a corner, and and having people tell me, why are you doing this to yourself? And so I had another one of those, and I was sitting, just bawling in the middle of, like under a church of all places, in the middle of this town that I was studying in. It was 4 a.m. and I was just utterly alone. I felt so alone and depressed, and I was a little drunk, of course, and I was like, this isn't working. Like, there was just knowing in me. And I was like, this is not what I came here for. This is miserable. I don't want this. And that's really when it was, in that moment when I was like, I have a feeling that I'm here for more. And I know that these memories are real. And I'm going to go about it in a scientific way. And I'm going to go and I'm going to find every single book, hopefully, like research-based, data-based. And I'm going to study this. And if I, at the end of this, find out that this was all just gobbledygoo made up in my mind, and maybe my mom had, I don't know, oxygen shortage, and that's why I had these experiences, or whatever else. You have a million people that are saying, but what of this and what of that? Of course, that's the scientific way. You have to really test it and prove it, right? Mm-hmm. But at the end of all of this, I had it, that was 10 years later, I had a Ph.D. And I can tell you now, I read so many books, so many research papers, so many things about this, of people that are credible, that are extremely scientific and data-based. And all of it comes together. It's all a big picture. There was never one thing one little piece where I was like, well, but that doesn't really fit into the big picture. No, all fits into the big picture. And that's when I finally, very like not that long ago, then received the message from my higher guidance, which was, I questioned them several times, like, are you really of the highest, most radiant love? And they were like, it's time. There's a reason why you were gifted with these memories. And it them to yourself. It is to share them so that people can understand, because this is an essential piece in the ascension process and in awakening people, to make them understand that there is a whole set of like cycle that we don't understand. It's not just the life cycle. This is just, like Shakespeare said, we're entering a stage and we're playing a role that we our own making. We chose this role, right? And we're learning all kinds of things. But there's two bookends to this. And there's birth, and then there's death. And then there's this whole other cycle in the background. And people have to start understanding that so that they can fully actualize and step into who they truly are, which is what Course in Miracle teaches it, unconditional love, right? And that's the whole point and purpose. And so in some ways, I think that's why the memories were gifted to me. That's why I had to go through all of this whole process so that I could come out at the other end and be like, hey, listen, I'm not just this like woo-woo person telling you this was an experience. Like, I had this experience and then I did some research on it. And everything, all the data, and I'm still researching it, but all the data, one day I'll put a book together about this. All the data is pointing in the direction of this is absolutely and entirely 100% more real than you and I talking here right now.
Yes, everything you said. I love it. Everything you said. And I'm so happy that in that moment, you found it. And I just talked about this on my channel, in that darkest time, in that darkest moment, in the heaviest moment, right? Depression, that is where life opens up, where you were like, this is not working. I am going, and I could hear it in your voice. It's funny because conversation wise, once you remembered that moment, your voice changed. You got into that, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to research this, and I love it. I love it. You officially stepped into your power, regardless of whether what you knew to be true was validated or not. I love that, Christine.
Yeah.
So, real briefly, I wanted you to talk about, I've heard you talk about your perspective of miscarriage, the how rich of experience that is for the soul of that baby, right? We see it as tragic, but I think you were talking about that, it's a gift for that soul and the mother to be. Do you have any thoughts on that? I don't even know if you remember talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, miscarriage is a really hard topic because it's obviously extremely tragic, especially for a woman who wishes to be a mother, right?
Yeah.
And invalidate the very physical, very real emotions that we women go through when we want a baby, and then especially when it's at later stages and then they miscarry, right? That's tragic, and I just want to, validate that.
Yeah.
And same time, that's where because we talked about, this is perfect because this is a perfect example of what's different, right? Like a traditional therapist would probably say, yes, this is tragic, right? And then a transpersonal therapist would come in, yes, this is tragic, and are you open to exploring why this might have happened, and how your purpose in this is coming in, what it is teaching you about all of this, the life cycle that we just talked about, right?
Yeah.
And at end, I mean, the story comes to mind. The story is described in The Cosmic Cradle, which is all about pre-birth experiences and memories and all of that. And there's a soul that wanted to come in initially as a boy. All right. And the couple, they were, I believe, of Jewish faith, or one of them was, and one wanted the boy to be circumcised and the other didn't. And the parents were going into such a disharmony. I mean, they had such big fights about this, that apparently there were words spoken that this soul remembered overhearing,
Wow.
weren't even conceived for
Wow.
more than 12 weeks yet, overhearing and saying, we're going to get a divorce over this. And this soul was like, hell no. I want an experience where my parents are back together. So short and long of it is that the mother actually had a miscarriage in the shower shortly before she had 12 months. She got to the 12-week mark. And then she went back and was like, okay, I'm going to try this again. But this time I'm going to come in as a girl, because then I can't have any fights about circumcision. So short and long of it is the mom became pregnant again about three years later, which was very much to the dismay of the sister that came after, because she always said, I wanted to come in, at this time, and you delayed my arrival.
Wow.
That was always the strife between the sisters of like, you delayed me. But in that instance, she actually then came in, and then she came in as a woman, and she's now well and alive. You can read her story in the Cosmic Cradle, and so this is just you could say from a non-transpersonal, and I know you said brief, I'm going to wrap this up, but from a non-transpersonal standpoint, assuming that there's only reality of the physical and maybe the mental, emotional, you could say, wow, this was really tragic. A woman pregnant washes her hair and loses her child. This is heartbreaking. And yes, it is. But from a spiritual perspective, it's really not. You gave this soul a very quick incarnation. Great. So they got that out of the way. They incarnated as a boy for a brief moment. You couldn't agree about circumcision. So cool. They're coming back the next time. And I've heard many moms having miscarriages saying, I have a feeling that that's the baby coming back. And I'm like, trust that feeling, because it's likely true. And something just didn't match up in their life plan. And then when you say that to a mom, if they're ready for it, they're like, oh, wow, that makes sense. Wow. Like I really helped this soul, and they're still coming to me as a baby,
Mm-hmm.
So that's my take. That's kind of what I can share there.
What a beautiful, and you said that was Cosmic Cradle, the book?
Yeah, called The Cosmic. Yes, I forgot the author, but yeah, it's different collections and stories of souls remembering, their birth and all of that. Yeah,
I'm gonna get that book. What a beautiful story. What a beautiful experience. I'm really blown away from what you shared. Thank you for sharing that. Christine, I know people are going to want to contact you. First, did you want to share any last words of wisdom, and then the best way to contact you if they want to talk to you and have questions?
I think what I want to share is that, in the sense of empowerment, we're all here to understand who we truly are, and that's unconditional love. And we teach it and we study it in every single way. There's not one that knows more than the other. I always learn from my clients. We learn from each other today. In the end, always, I think the most important choice we make every day is to always shift back to love, to the capacity that we can in that moment. And that will look different every day. But as long as we have that intention of shifting back into a loving consciousness, we're on our path and we're perfect. So those are my last words there.
I love that. I love that. And is it best that people contact you via your website?
Yeah, I think that's best. You can learn a little bit more about my website. I practice as an alternative holistic healer and therapist. So you can, if you're wanting to have a one-on-one session with me there, you can book through there. I collaborate with a local spa, but I also do virtuals with them. So wherever you are in the world, you can book, if you click on book, and then there's instructions there, or you can contact me and I'll put you in. And then you can always, send me emails. That's the email address is it's Dr. Christine at gmail.com. And the website is it's drchristine.com. That's how you can get in touch with me. And yeah.
Beautiful. And Christine, your clients or anybody going through an experience, whether it's depression or, anything where they are seeking a deeper meaning, right?
That is an accurate description. I work with a lot of people who are looking for a deeper meaning, who are working through really hard times and just need a guide to kind of, connect with their own spiritual guidance. It's a lot about empowerment. I always say, I'm your guide. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I'm going to help you figure out your own truths about how to get to the place that you need to be in. And I'm also I'm working on this. This hasn't been rolled out as of yet, and we have September of 2024. But by the end of the year, I'm rolling out a higher consciousness academy where I'm teaching 3 levels of courses all around higher consciousness and soul purpose, and then creating a platform for people to really engage with like-minded people and find their soul purpose. Because, like you said, full circle, we all are, a little wheel of the bigger, grander divine plan. We're all needed now. We're all needed to step into that now at this moment. And that's part of my purpose, is help other souls discover theirs. And so that's going to be rolled out. I have a wait list now. So if people are interested in that, they can contact me for that as well.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I love it. I love it. I love it. I can't love it any more than what I do right now. Thank you so much, Christine. Thank you for everything that you have done and that you are doing for the collective. Thank you. And I have closing remarks for you before I let you go.
Yeah.
Okay, yes. So, Christine, your invaluable pre-birth memories, coupled with the challenging journey of people denying those memories throughout your childhood, has provided you with the priceless opportunity to relate to many. You have felt the disappointment of having others shut down such an essential part of who you are due to their own limited understanding. But you did not stay there. In your own time, you heard the call of your soul and gave voice to your inner child by validating your truth. You found answers where there were none, and you made intuitive connections relying on your own research and inner guidance. Your wide array of experiences provided you with the fierce motivation to delve deep into those aspects of the human experience that goes beyond traditional labels and assessments surrounding psychology. You did not merely accept the conditioning of the collective, but you kept going and pushed through the fog of ignorance and found your own way. And Christine, this is what marks you as a true pioneer. Your experience, compassion, and your practice will continue to light the way and usher in the next generation of children who also have pre-birth memories and memories of other lifetimes. Now is the time that we create and manifest an environment that is truly a safe space for ourselves and our children to speak freely about our spirituality. And as you have stated, it puts them in alignment, like it put you in alignment with your purpose. Thank you so much for the work you continue to do in this arena and for honoring your soul's purpose of assisting the collective in waking up to enliven our birthright to remember that which we are. Thank you for finally allowing your guide to push you through so that you can plunge into this physical realm. We are much better here because you are here. So thank you for your presence here on this planet.
Oh, that was beautifully said. Thank you so much. I was
Yeah. And
thank
thank you
you.
for joining the show. So thank you for joining the show. And Christine, we end with a heart. Yes, yes. And thank you, everyone who listened to this. Reach out to Christine. As you see, she has incredible wisdom, y'all. Not only through her studies, but experientially. She has incredible wisdom. So if she resonates with you, reach out to her, check out her website. She's very approachable. And subscribe here or share this video with others if you think it will benefit them. And we love you, right, Christine?
Oh, yes.
We
Yes.
love you and have a great day. Until next time, y'all. Bye-bye.
Bye.